On this episode of the Shared Security Podcast, did the Trump administration just order the U.S. Cyber Command and CISA to stand down on the Russian cyber threat? Yes, no, maybe, who knows at this point, right? But we'll be providing our thoughts and comments on that recent situation. And maybe a little bit about the Canadian tariff situation too. Maybe, just maybe, because we do have Scott Wright here to talk about that. Our great neighbor in the north, Canada.
Everybody's so interested in us these days.
We are interested in what's going on in Canada. At least Kevin and I are. I don't know about the rest of the country, but you know. And then we want to talk about what the heck is going on with Firefox and their recent privacy changes where they have apparently granted itself broad rights to user data. So now what? What browser do I recommend to all my friends and family now? Well, we'll talk about that too. And joining me for these stories and more, Scott Wright, who I've already introduced from the Great White North, Canada, my friend, because Canada is still my friend. and Kevin, who's in Florida.
Oh, man.
Yeah. But we're friends with Floridians. Why can't we be friends with Canadians, right?
I personally believe that we should be friends with everybody except for Nazis.
I agree with that statement. That is the one statement that should unify the world.
Yeah, but sadly,
But here we are.
it does.
How you guys doing? I mean, beside the state of the world.
How's everybody things going on at one time?
I have a lot of I'm the same way. I agree. It's been pretty crazy lately. But let's talk about this recent not order from the Trump administration, because I guess I just want to set the stage, right? Like the Russian cyber threat. I mean, globally, not just as it pertains to the United States, but this is kind of a well-known thing, right? This is not something that is fake news, something that's made up, but this is a well-documented thing that Russia has been doing cyber espionage and attacks on organizations, not just governments, but companies for a long time, right? And so the fact that they're saying now we'll stand down, and then they kind of reversed that and said, no, we never said that. But then, journalists and others have said, no, that's what you said. I think is very confusing for people. And I think it sets a very dangerous precedent because we're talking about one of the largest threats that is out there to organizations and governments with cybersecurity. I mean, what do you guys think of this? This is crazy.
I don't know that it's crazy.
Well, not what's crazy anymore, right?
No, I don't mean it that way. I mean it is. Here's my issue with all of this. Everything contradicts.
Yes.
And we don't know. It is actually very common. My understanding, and I'm not an expert, and I know that, I'm on Twitter, so I'm an expert at anything I want to be an expert at. My understanding is anytime there's negotiations going on, it is common for the DoD to say, hey, you know what? Hold up a little bit. Now, that sounds to me, the non-military person who just kind of fiddle farts around, as different than, hey, you know what? Stop all planning of things, right? Like those sound like two different things.
Yeah.
I also know that we are getting way too many things. The sky is falling. And sadly, in my opinion, most of the sky is falling things are actually diverting attention from the actual sky is falling items, right? That's my opinion. Here's what I think. I think it's messed up if it's true. I think that it is likely true.
I think so too, actually.
Yeah. Not a popular opinion from ignorant assholes, but I believe very firmly that Trump is the best thing to happen to Russia in a very long time. And
well, he doesn't hide that fact either.
No.
That's the thing is I mean, if you're going to lower our defenses, our cyber defenses and probably other defenses as well.
Yeah.
We'll look at Ukraine, look at all these other things going on to negotiate with Russia. I think anybody can put two and two together that this is what he's doing. So yeah, But I think it's extremely reckless to change this specific policy is very dangerous.
I believe that this is likely being misdescribed. I think that the way the articles are written are bad or difficult for us to actually judge what the issue actually is. But I will tell you that from reading what I've read and listening to what I've looked at, I believe very firmly that the federal government is adjusting how they approach and evaluate Russia. And I think short-term and long-term, that will be bad for the United States.
I agree.
I saw somebody say today that this is the first effective use of work-from-home colonization that we've ever seen. Like, this is a work-from-home invasion of the United States. So Russia didn't even have to travel to take control of the government. And I say that as a joke, but I really believe it's accurate.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I'm a kid of the 80s, just like you, Kevin, and I had thought that the Russian invasion would be like Red Dawn.
Yep.
You know, they're coming in parachutes and, you know, they're taking over houses and suburbs, but no.
And instead, they got an obese, very orange gas to somehow convince 77 million Americans that he was better for them than anybody else. But you know, he's donated back his $400,000 salary. We'll ignore how much it's spent on golfing in Marwan. And overall, is disgusting.
Yeah. Well, and Scott, just for your reference, you know, like the last episode, we basically just like, you know, we always kind of said like, oh, we try to play the neutral podcast of not like getting into politics and things like that. Oh, we just blew that out of the water.
We did a good job of being neutral about politics.
Yeah,
I definitely went far from neutral.
I mean, to be fair, Kevin still said, you know, he's a libertarian, right? He's you know, centrist, whatever, but you know, doesn't side with either party, hates them both. Like we all agree with that. But then with everything that's happening in the world, you kind of have to lean one way or the other. And we're just saying we're leaning one way because there's not much middle ground anymore. That's just gone. Yeah.
Succeed because good men do not.
I guess.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say is it's hard to comment on the security implications of this from my point of view as a canon, but it generally looks like unclear messaging to the public, whether that's intentional or not. And it certainly contributes to the lack of confidence in U.S. military and cyber leadership by international observers anyway. And maybe even the American press and media, right? I mean, why is this being reported by The Guardian and I don't know if there was a response or from American media.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe the American media just doesn't care anymore. which is one of the reasons why I actually try to get more of my news from independent media, like journalists and things. I mentioned the other day, like 404 Media, like those were the ex-Motherboard Vice researchers and journalists. And I love the stuff that they do because they actually do real research and they back things up with facts, where a lot of the mainstream media is all about just, you know, the ratings, and they'll just say whatever. It doesn't matter what side you're on, right? And I think
there's a lot of
big shift in
editorializing,
that.
right? You see a lot of editorializing on the media, both sides, which is helps. It doesn't make it any clearer.
Right. Exactly. So let's talk about Firefox, because this is another story that I was just kind of, what the heck is going on? Because they had made some changes to their privacy policy where they have essentially just kind of changed the wording, I'll just say, which is around the licensing around how they use your data as you use the web browser, right? Firefox. And it's raised some concerns because now some critics are saying this, while it doesn't say it explicitly that we are going to use your data or sell your data or whatever, it does open the door to the possibility of allowing third parties, allowing AI training, like all of those things. And if you know any history about Firefox, I mean, they have been kind of staunch privacy advocates for a long time. This dates back way back. But over the years, I think we have slowly seen through, I think, leadership that has come into Mozilla that has been more profit monetization focused, moving more away from the way that open source and that community was building a product. So I think that type of community has a certain connotation of freedom and privacy and all of those things. So I think it's interesting to see, that they are starting to change. And I think that's the message here. And I don't know if it's like 5-alarm fire, like tell your friends and family don't use Firefox anymore, but what browser is privacy aware these days? Or what is the best private browser? Is there even a private browser anymore? I guess that's the question I have.
No. I'll start my answer with
No.
unbiased. You ever?
Yeah.
I saw this meme yesterday. Not meme, but somebody asked this question on Blue Sky or Facebook or something, and it was like, "What is a thing you believe that you can't prove?" Right, like something that you just in your gut, you're like, you know what? That's what I think. Like, have you ever? And it's an example, but I was actually thinking about it this morning as I was laying in bed. Yeah, have you ever known somebody who's like, I can't have my foot out from underneath the blanket because if I do something, I'll grab it. Right? I don't believe that. But I know people who do. Right? Like, but that type of thing where it's like this fundamental belief that you may not even have expressed or anything like that. Well, I have one of those fundamental beliefs about Mozilla, and I believe that it's all an act and they've never been privacy funded, and that the reality is that they've been abusing our data for years. Now, I say that with zero proof and zero actual accusation.
Just like Doge.
Foundation. Right. No, Doge, I don't have to believe it. Doge is evil. Elon Musk is running it, but not running it, not an employee, whatever, yeah. With regards to Mozilla Foundation, I've not used Firefox in a very long time. I stopped using Firefox because I felt that for my usage, they were going down a path that was more dangerous around privacy than they portrayed themselves. One of the very first things that did that was the move to DNS over HTTPS. Right. I said back then, I think I even said it on the podcast.
You did.
If I recall
Yeah.
correctly,
I think you did.
That was a bad idea. It was a privacy problem, and then people needed to urge against this. And bluntly, except for very specific test cases and uses, I don't even have Firefox installed on any of my primary machines. So I read this entire, our policy, we never had a privacy policy, so we had to create one, which is a valid statement. And you misread it. We don't mean it the way you think we mean it, but we are going to keep your data. Look, all browsers have a level of access to our stuff.
They have to.
We should not be comfortable with, and yet have to be, because they have. If I'm going to do online banking, my browser is going to have access to my online banking stuff, period. Right? Like, that's the way it works.
Kind of like your browser is equivalent to the kernel in an operating system now, right? I mean, it has
exactly.
access to
Except
everything.
I would even argue it knows more than the kernel of the operating system, because it is possible to do encryption outside of the kernel, and then there would be hoops the kernel would have to get get into that encrypted data. That's a simplification, but I personally use Edge for my main driver and Chrome for my secondary non-business profiles. And it's not because I believe either of those browsers are safer, more privacy focused. It's that I believe that Google and Microsoft have been more upfront about their evilness than Mozilla, and I'm not comfortable with it. That's what it boils down to. They were going to screw me over. I'd rather the ones that told me they were going to screw me over up front.
It's very interesting you say that because, there's always been the, Google is bad, right?
Yep.
Remember, like back when Google first started, of course, they said, like, what was their mantra? It was like,
evil.
Don't be evil.
Don't be evil.
Or do no evil or something like that. Yeah.
Right.
Remember when they stopped that?
Yeah.
It was like, oh my gosh. Like,
yeah.
guys,
Google is collecting our data and they
Yep.
like, I mean, you're right. For many years, Google was really bad, like really, really bad from a privacy perspective. But then maybe in the last like 5 to 8 years, like they came out with privacy controls and much more granular, options around how they use your data. I mean, even like the Google like tracking ad cookies and all that can be opted out of. Like it's really improved, and you got to give Google some credit there. And so a lot of times we were recommending don't use Chrome because it's Google and then Google is evil. And now I'm like, well, what's the lesser of the two evils now?
Yeah.
Right? Like Firefox is probably doing the same thing. They're not as big and ginormous as Google, but
my issue is they're being upfront.
They're not being upfront. I agree.
Yeah, that is my problem with it. And this is, we can talk about how unreasonable I am. We can talk about my, as a demonstration of my unreasonableness, my personal vendetta against all of the leaders of the Debian project, right? It's unreasonable. I recognize it's unreasonable. I have the same feeling toward Mozilla. I feel like Mozilla is speaking out of one side of their mouth and the other side of it. I just don't like it. But that is not a new thing. This privacy policy did not cause me to believe that. This privacy policy just validated it for me.
I generally agree. I just use multiple browsers just to keep things around, right? So that not everything is in one place. I don't have any strong feeling about which one is more secure, but I think generally I agree in terms of Google. Although I think Google probably, as we said, they have access to everything anyway. So the privacy things that they put in place, is that really meaningful? I don't know.
Yeah. I go back now to like browser extensions. I rather recommend like uBlock Origin and Privacy Badger and other things which are more cross-platform anyway, with how ads and other things are being filtered out from your browsing that are kind of cross-platform. So it doesn't really matter what browser you use. It's more about like what are the add-ons and things that help your privacy or keep yourself private. But other than that, like the browser you use these days really doesn't matter from a privacy perspective. They're all kind of doing the same thing. Well, with that was a fun episode. So good to have both co-hosts on. Scott's in a hotel.
Sorry, I didn't have to wear much today. But
No, it's quite okay. It's okay. You gotta take a break sometimes, right? So thank you for listening, everyone. And until next time, stay safe, stay secure, and stay private. Thank you for watching or listening to this episode. Be sure to subscribe wherever you like to get your podcasts. Visit sharedsecurity.net for merch, previous episodes, and more. If you'd like to help support the podcast, join our Patreon to get ad-free episodes and many more exclusive supporter-only benefits. Visit sharedsecurity.net/supporter for more details.